Senator Hughes, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 8.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take and consider at this time on third reading Senate Bill 8, the heartbeat bill.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwertner, Seliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There being 19 ayes and 12 nays, the rule of suspension chair now lays out on third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 8. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 8 relating to abortion.
Members, before we go to the final motion, anyone who wants to speak on the bill, this would be the time. Senator Lucio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I must say, as we had some fun just moments ago, I looked at the faces of all my colleagues on the floor, and I said to myself, how beautiful life is, and how beautiful it is to be able to share our lives together here on this floor, have some fun, and at the same time, do our best to make a difference to the people of this whole state, not just our districts. Senator Hughes, thank you for this bill. This bill speaks volumes. When I hear a person's beating heart, I just don't hear their heart. I hear their soul speaking, and I listen carefully. In committee, as I referenced yesterday, we heard the sound of two heartbeats. One, a developed baby in a mother's womb. The other, a newly beating baby. And those two recordings, obviously, I couldn't tell the difference, right? And you couldn't either. And nobody else said anything, but I could look at their faces, and I could see them gesturing that they were one and the same. But with both of them, you and I and others heard a human life. I know we did. Abortion is a terrible thing. As all of you well know by now, I am pro-life, but more than that, I am pro-lifetime, from conception to natural death. I want to be consistent, so I am also strongly opposed to the death penalty, because we know that it stops a beating heart as well. Again, consistent. There's nothing in this world more precious to any one of us than life. Our families, our friends, our neighbors, the people we know, is something so precious, and when we lose life, we mourn. And some of us never forget those that go from our world. Quoting Cardinal Bergoglio, now known as Pope Francis, he said, quote, "Caring for life from the beginning to the end, what a simple thing. What a beautiful thing," he said. "So go forth and don't be discouraged. Care for life. It's worth it," unquote. Pro-life policies are so much more than just a bill to vote on. Life is precious, and it is to be respected and protected from conception to natural death. Thou hast granted you life. He called you through his grace. A heartbeat is life. Indeed it is. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator Lucio. Senator Whitmire, for what purpose? Speak on the bill.
I'd like to speak in
You're recognized.
opposition. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, members, if I could have your attention, I was very hesitant to speak because I don't think any votes are going to change, but Senator Lucio actually motivated me because, Eddie, I remember a couple of sessions back, you made a tough vote with the supporters of this bill, and I was driving back to Houston, and I believe it was on the Senator Patrick's talk show at that time, and you mentioned that you were proud of your vote, which I respect, going to change, but you also want to remind your colleagues that you were voting with that you can't just be pro-birth, but you have to be pro-life, means after birth. And that was really a profound statement that I heard years ago, and I haven't forgotten it. We should continue to remind folks that whether you're talking about Medicaid expansion or health care, that the birth is the first subject we're talking about, and it really doesn't end there. I rise in opposition to Medicaid expansion. I want to speak for a moment to represent the voices that can't be here today. I know for a fact that there are a large number of Texans that disagree with the majority that are supporting this bill. And they do so, Senator Hughes, out of personal experiences, some family matters, some, you mentioned yesterday, you'd spoken to experts that said the heartbeat would really be the best time to judge the viability. Let me just cite an expert that came to me in my neighborhood a couple of years ago. She's a doctor at Texas Children's Hospital. And she said, I know you're going to be dealing with this topic in the future, and I want you to know as a professional, we're doing remarkable things at Texas Children in terms of caring for fetuses, newborn. And she said, one of our experiences are because of the Supreme Court's ruling that 20 weeks is viability, that we're beginning to see, alarmingly, that some fetuses, some children are being born, their brain has not developed, their spines have not developed, and they are so underdeveloped when they're capable of leaving the hospital that the families do not want to take them home. And, you know, I'm listening to this expert. She said, and we really don't know what to do with that situation because they are becoming wards of the state indefinitely. So I rise to let us know things are not as plain sometimes as the bill's laid out to be. So there's a health care concern, probably an unintended consequence to your proposal that hasn't been brought up. I've been very fortunate in my life to meet many people in many different situations. I was a young caseworker, what was then called the welfare department, working my way through college in the food stamp program. In 1970, one of my coworkers during a break started crying and said that she had just learned that she was pregnant. Her boyfriend had left her. She didn't know what to do. Back then, abortions were illegal in the state of Texas in 1970. I came here in 73. So out of desperation, she said, I've got to get to New York. And there's a system that will allow you to go to Bush Intercontinental, join other young ladies, some housewives. But I need $300. So if I sinned, in the eyes of some of you, I assisted her with $300. Took her to the airport. Everyone thought I was probably delivering a girlfriend. I promise you, God is my witness, she was a co-worker. She went up there, it was a gut-wrenching decision, but she had no one else to turn to. So I've never forgotten her experience. She came back the next day, later married, has her own family today. So I could cite other examples, and I just rise to represent those instances and hope that my expressions will be one that, let's respect, as convinced as you are, Senator Paxton, and others, that you're correct, that there's a different point of view, and let you know also, when we're having this debate on this, probably the most emotional issue that I've seen in my career, that our words matter, tears matter, and I know the debate yesterday brought some tears to those listening to you, that we just have to respect that there's a different point of view and a different experience. And I'm not talking on behalf of the professional activists, the Planned Parenthoods of the world, which I think they ought to change their name, because I think they'd make more progress, because y'all got them so labeled. But those who get their health care there, and those that have prayed about this decision, talked to their spouse or partner, their minister, their God. And I would just close by saying, if I could just get you to at least, on both sides, to respect the views of the other one, because this is just, we're not talking about a budget, we're talking about probably the most personal, gut-wrenching decision, regardless of whichever side you're on. Let's say, Mr. President, I'll vote no on behalf of those that I've witnessed throughout my life that have a different point of view than the author and his supporters, who I do respect their point of view.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To speak in opposition to the bill, Mr. President.
You're recognized.
I very much respect Senator Whitmire's consideration. I know that the votes on this bill won't change, but I'm hoping that by speaking this, my truth, that perhaps we will be able to build relationship and maybe change some votes on future bills for the care and the compassion toward these women, these children, and these families in the future. This particular bill seeks to delay or dissuade a woman's right to choose through isolating her by the threat of civil or criminal prosecution or professional ruin of anyone who attempts to help her. And so I rise in opposition for my grandmother who helped my mother, for my mother who helped countless women who faced this difficult choice and had their own conversations with God. We in this building cannot and should not seek to script an individual's conversation with their God. In these most intimate moments. So I rise in opposition because this dissuades and seeks to isolate a woman in a very, very difficult moment from the very people who are most likely to provide her the support and the comfort in this moment. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you, Senator Eckhart. Senator Hughes, close.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. I thank each of my colleagues that spoke on this bill and representing strong feelings that each of us hold, and certainly folks back home hold. I don't guess there's anything more visceral, more difficult as far as issues that we grapple with here than this one. Fundamentally, this bill says that heartbeat. Now, I can't ask you to do this, but if each one of us were to place a hand up here under our chin, we would feel that pulse, because each one of us has a heartbeat. That's the sign of life. Our hearts tell us that. Our heads tell us that. Science tells us that. And so, when does life begin? Folks may put the line in different places in the development of that little unborn baby. But it's hard to argue with the fact that that heartbeat, the heart is beating, blood is pumping, there's life. That's human life worthy of protection. And as we do this, even with other bills we'll consider today, we want to show love and support to those mothers, many of whom are in difficult, seemingly impossible situations. As we do that, let's protect that innocent human life, the most helpless, the most innocent a human can ever be. I ask for your vote yes on passage of the Texas Heartbeat Act.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Shortner, Sulliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There are 19 yes votes, 12 no votes, and the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I be recognized on a motion to reduce to writing and place in the journal the remarks of Senator Lucio, Senator Whitmire, Senator Eckhart on third reading.
And do you want yours included?
I should probably include mine. Thank you, Mr. President. All of the remarks on third reading. Thank you.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Hughes, you're recognized once again to suspend the... Sorry, not Senator Hughes. Senator Hancock, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1173. We are on third reading again, members.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend to suspend the regular order of business, take and consider Senate Bill 1173.
Any objection? Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham.
19 ayes, 12 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1173. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1173, relating the regulation of abortion.
Senator Lucio, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I was truly moved by the sincerity of our dean, who I respect so much, for his leadership of this chamber. And I have been privileged to work with him since 1991. And I think we all respect one another, and I certainly want to make sure that I make it very clear today. I, for one, am not trying to be judgmental on our differences. Not at all. It's the opposite. I respect, admire, and love each living soul on this floor. Senator Hancock, thank you for bringing this bill to this point. And thank you, Governor Patrick, for making this such a priority session for this bill and others. I want to quote from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith Declaration of Procured Abortion. Quote, "The first right of the human person is his life. He has other goods, and some are more precious, but this one is fundamental. The condition of all the others, Hence, it must be protected above all others. It does not belong to society, nor does it belong to public authority. in any form to recognize this right for some and not others. All discrimination is evil, whether it is founded on race, sex, color, or religion. It is not recognition by another that constitutes the right. This right is antecedent to its recognition. It demands recognition, and it is strictly unjust to refuse it, unquote. I want to repeat, the first right is life, and that right does not belong to the world. We cannot judge what life is more valuable than others. I praise him because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. His works are wonderful. I know full well he sanctified each of our lives in his own image. To all of you, I again want to reiterate, I have a profound appreciation and respect. Senator Whitmire is right. The dean heard me loud and clear. And I said a while ago in my opening remarks that I am pro-lifetime, which means from conception to natural death and everything that happens between that period of time. You're right, Dean. We should be considerate. We should be open to looking at how we can be a good neighbor to one another, to see how we can improve the lives of others in our great state, and to create a better quality of life for all. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Thank you, Senator Lucio. Senator Johnson, for what purpose do you wish to speak on the bill?
Wish to speak on the bill.
You're recognized.
And really generally, really generally on the entire topic of reproductive rights and abortion ban. And I appreciate the passions of everyone and you all bearing with us throughout the long emotional day of yesterday. I wish to emphasize, particularly in the context of this bill, we are not talking about morality on the one side versus cold constitutional logic on the other. These are two different pursuits of moral ends, and we have different views about them. And for those of us who believe that we've gone too far in this case, I think we've ventured into the place that legislature shouldn't go, into the province of the spiritual and the personal. And that, viewed from that side, you can look at an absolute ban on abortion, a ban such as under this bill. It can look cruel. It can look cruel to the people that are affected by this ban. I know that many of you don't see that, but those of us on the other side of it with moral aims do see it that way. So we can disagree, but please recognize that we are all in pursuit of moral ends. Senator Lucio, I've listened to the heartbeat of all three of my children. I've experienced that spiritual thrill and that excitement. I've held them in my arms when they're born. I know the value of human life, the sanctity of human life. We disagree on where it begins. We don't disagree on the value. I hope we can all pursue that value amidst our disagreements on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Hancock, close.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And members, this bill does provide perinatal palliative care. It seeks to provide some of that counseling to those individuals going through very, very, very difficult decisions. And I don't think anyone on this floor takes light those decisions, the emotional, the soul-searching spiritual strain that those decisions may have, no matter where the decision ends up. And so with this legislation, we want to make sure that those individuals going through those decisions have proper counseling before making that decision, and that is a large part of this bill. So with that, I move final passage.
Secretary, recall the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwartner,
When they're born, I know the value.
Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There being 19 ayes and 12 no votes, the bill passes. Congratulations, Senator. Members, we have another third reading bill. Senator Paxton, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 9.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to Senate Bill 9 on third reading. Mr. President and members, this is the Senate Bill 9 that we passed to engrossment yesterday relating to the prohibition of abortion, providing a civil penalty, and creating a criminal offense.
Senator Alvarado, for what purpose? Do you wish to speak on the bill? Do you want to wait till we get to third reading? Let me suspend the regular order of business. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham.
There are 19 ayes, 12 nays to suspend the regular order of business. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage committee substitute for Senate Bill 9. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 9 relating to prohibition of abortion.
Senator Alvarado, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Paxton, you and I have debated this issue very respectfully with one another, both on the floor and off the floor. I rise in opposition to this bill with the utmost respect for you, Senator Paxton. I rise today for Texas women. August the 18th, we celebrated, as I mentioned, the 100th anniversary of women having the right to vote. Over the past 100 years, our society has made great strides in gender equity. Since then, we've celebrated so many firsts: the first woman in space, the first woman on the Supreme Court, the first woman to head a Fortune 500 company. We have more women serving in elected office, from Congress, Vice President, to this body. But yet today, women and men in this body will vote to take away personal liberty from Texas women. If this bill becomes law, Texas women will no longer have the liberty to control their own bodies, the freedom to make choices affecting their families, or even the sanctity of the private relationship between a patient and a doctor. If this sounds familiar, I probably said these words last session, or maybe the session before that, or the session before that in the House, because we seem to debate women's reproductive rights every session. This last bill sends women back to a time half a century ago when illegal abortions were responsible for nearly 1 in 5 pregnancy-related deaths in this country. Women were forced to seek health care in back alleys. Senator Paxton, in your own words yesterday, you talked about balancing the life of the child and the mother. If we don't protect our mothers, who will? Today, approximately 25 million women around the world resort to unsafe abortions each year, and complications from these unsafe procedures result in 15% of all maternal deaths. However, well-intentioned, this bill is a stunning and sweeping intrusion into the patient-doctor relationship. And it threatens their irreparable harm and the health and the autonomy of Texas women. It puts doctors, we just honored healthcare providers earlier. This bill puts doctors in the ethically untenable possession of denying needed medical care to their patients, and takes decisions about continuing a pregnancy out of the hands of the patient. I don't think elected officials are better equipped than doctors to make these decisions. This bill is written requires a doctor to wait and see if a pregnancy complication or condition becomes life-threatening. I asked that question yesterday, and Senator Paxton, I don't think we ever got a clear answer on that. Although when we talk about the importance of mental health, this bill excludes mental health. Why are we diminishing the value of a woman's mental health? What message does that send to Texas women? Instead, these bills marginalize women and criminalize doctors for following the ethical guidelines of their profession. It's been said, why aren't we talking about Medicaid? If we're talking about saving lives, let's give people access to health care. Let's talk about equal pay for equal work. Let's talk about making child care more affordable, or helping Texans get back on their feet after losing jobs and losing health care. Millions of people lost health care during this pandemic, and yet we're not talking about that. On this day in history, March the 30th, 2021, after all we've been through, the storm, the pandemic, our message to women, to Texas women, is that we're going to such great lengths to control you and suffocate your access to health care that we're willing to throw doctors in prison. That's the story that'll be written today. And it's a narrative I cannot endorse. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Alvarado. Senator Lucio, is your light on? You wish to speak on the bill?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I very humbly say to you this afternoon, I do not apologize as I rise again to talk about abortion and this bill. I just ask you sincerely to bear with me briefly. Very few things in our country inspires passion in us as much as the abortion debate. It is a debate about life, or more importantly, the destruction of life. Nobody in this chamber would ever say that it is okay to take a life. But here we are debating whether it is okay when that life has not yet been born. If it is okay when that life does not yet have a heartbeat. If it is okay when that life does not yet have the shape of you and me, or me. We are having this debate because we have slightly different worldviews. My worldview is one of faith. It provides me an explanation of the world we live in. It allows me to know where we are headed in our travels through this world, in our life. I have a moral foundation that guides me to right and wrong, I believe. It creates the building blocks for life. From the moment I wake up, I am guided. I feel very strongly about that. When I go to sleep, I am guided. And even when sleeping, my soul rests because it is at peace. I feel this inner peace. No matter what your worldview is, we all believe in the golden rule. We all agree we should treat others the way we want to be treated. This sets the moral standard. It creates a world we want to attain. While we all agree on the world we want to live in, we differ on how to get there, and more importantly, how to legislate others so they may see the world as well. As legislators, we are bound to uphold the constitutions of the United States and of Texas. In our State Affairs Committee hearing, I defended Roe versus Wade as the law of the land, though I disagree with that paramount 1973 judicial opinion. In doing so, I kept my commitment to my oath. This bill does not conflict with that. In fact, it strengthens our commitment to the Constitution and to the judicial branch as an equal branch of government. This bill has the potential to save tens of thousands of lives. I tremble at the thought that our Lord would even ask me in displeasure, Paul, so I'm trembling now. I just tremble at the thought that he would ask me, what have you done? Senator Alvarado, I respect you, your beautiful life. I've kept up with you and Facebook and all the wonderful things you do for your district. I wasn't going to make any remarks and even mention your name, but you brought up the fact that women's rights will be offended and done away with bills like this, and I humbly disagree. This is about the rights of the unborn, those that yet have taken a fresh breath of air like you and I were privileged to have. I didn't want to share this story with you all today, but I'm motivated to do so because of what my dear, good young leader friend said here today. But all of you know, most of you know, I'm one of 10 kids. And my mother and father did not have 10 kids. There were 9 of us. One day, my dad was on his way home, Central Blanco, after work on a Friday, and his buddies asked him to stop and have a cold beer before he went home. So they went into this lounge downtown Brownsville, and they ordered a beer, and they were having a beer, and all of a sudden, my dad heard a cry. A baby was crying. He told us a story. And my dad questioned the barmaid, says, there's a baby, I hear a cry. What is that? And it's just a baby, a newborn baby, right under the counter on a beer box, smelly. My dad examined the baby, and he just found it to be very sick. And he threatened her. He says, you better take that child to the clinic now and make sure she gets the attention she deserves. The medical, or she's going to die. And her answer, Senator Alvarado, which is the answer of so many, unfortunately, in our world, says, you want her, take her. My dad took her home. And my mother welcomed her. And my beautiful sister is 67 years old today. It was her right to live. And it was God's plan for her to be part of our family so she could join the rest of us to take care of our parents in their older years when they needed us. I've seen it all in my lifetime. And the people I represent and the poverty that exists in our own state. When have I not voted to give the money necessary for prenatal care? When have I not voted to expand medication or spend the necessary money to give women their health care needs. Never. So this is not about discriminating against women. This is about giving the unborn a chance to live. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lucio. Senator Paxton, you're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. Every last one of you. Yesterday, Senator Alvarado mentioned that we have 10 women serving in the Senate. And as I was walking back to my office with my staff, and I was thinking about the opportunity I have to stand on this floor with you and to serve together with you, and all of the things that we worked through together yesterday. One of the members of my staff said to me, you know, Senator, when Senator Alvarado said that, it occurred to me that there are 10 women on the floor of the Senate, and not 9, because your birth mother chose life for you. You know, life is our most precious freedom. And it's the gateway to those others that we hold so dear. Liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And when we talk about life, especially in this context, in a pregnancy, I long for the day when we are all thinking, not in terms of either or, but of both and. Absolutely, with all my heart, my compassion and support, all of us, for the woman carrying this child, whatever the circumstances, and whatever that takes. But always mindful that there is another voice, a voice that can't yet be heard, can't yet speak for itself. And I do speak on behalf of that voice today, because I could so easily have been one of those voices, as I shared with you yesterday. Because my life began under circumstances that might very easily have ended in abortion before I ever took a breath of fresh air. We have much work to do around this issue to promote a culture of life. And Senator Alvarado, you and I yesterday spoke afterward. And we both committed to one another to work together to do that. You have my pledge. My parents, in addition to their situation, not being able to have children themselves, and adopting myself and my little brother, also were foster parents. And my mom and dad fostered newborns, somewhere around 20, I believe, in succession. And I remember about the time that babies would start sleeping through the night, they'd be placed. And one of those little babies, named Lauren, is still in my life today. And she is a young woman with her own child. But I remember when I had my firstborn, and I held him in my arms, and I was thinking about, this is my blood relative. I've never met a blood relative before. And I thought about the unimaginable situation my birth mother was in when she chose to have me placed for adoption so I could grow up in a family that was stable. And then I remember being so sleep deprived, like my daughter Maddie is right now with our little 3-month-old grandson, because the baby wasn't sleeping through the night. And I remember calling my mom, and I said, Mom, how'd you do this over and over again? Because again, these foster babies, about the time they'd start sleeping through the night, they'd be placed for adoption, and then they would get another one. And I remember what my mom said. I said, Mom, this is brutal. And any mother remembers that feeling. And my mom said, actually, Angela, the brutal part isn't that, the sleep deprivation. She said, in so many ways, the brutal part is when they go. And they're not with me anymore. And they go to the family. But she said, you know what? I know what it's like to get a baby. And it's worth it. And there are two voices. The voice of the mother. And we are committed to serving that woman. But there is the voice of the unborn. And today, I ask you to join me in speaking for them, supporting their opportunity to really pursue life, liberty, and happiness, like us. And with that, Mr. President, I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwertner, Sulliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There being 19 ayes and 12 nays, the bill passes. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Members, we have another third reading bill. Senator Lucio, you're recognized by the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 394.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so move.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwertner, Sulliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There being 19 ayes, 12 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 394. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 394 relating to abortion complication reporting.
Senator Betancourt, you wish to speak? Your light's on the bill?
Yes, I would.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to Senator Lucio, I just want to say, you are like St. Paul. You have a constant view of what is right. And for my part, as Barnabas, I can just encourage you to continue to speak to your matters of faith, because you mean a great deal to me and to the audience, and not just the Catholic brothers, but to all those out there. So I want to thank you and commend your work. God bless you.
Thank you, Senator Betancourt.
Senator Lucio, you're recognized on final passage.
I'd like to move final passage, Senate Bill 394, Mr. President and members. Thank you.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton.
There are 19 ayes and 12 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations. Members, we have another third reading bill. Senator Perry, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for 1647.
Move to suspend the regular order of business, Senate Bill 1647.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwartner, Sulliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
Rules are suspended. Chair now lays out in third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1647. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1647 relating to information regarding perinatal palliative care.
You're recognized on final passage.
Move to final passage, Senate Bill 1647.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwartner, Sulliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There being 19 ayes, 12 nays, bill is finally passed. Congratulations. I believe we have one more third reading bill. Senator Paxton, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 802.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menendez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwartner, Sulliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
There being 20 ayes and 11 nays, the rules are suspended. Members, we have a third reading amendment. Secretary will lay out the bill on third reading and final passage. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 802 relating to a required resource access assistance offer before an abortion is performed or induced.
Following amendment, Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Taylor.
Senator Taylor, hold until the amendment is to the back row. Give everyone a moment. Senator Taylor, you're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Yes, in looking at this bill, there was one thing we noticed that I thought needed to be added, and I think Senator Paxton is amenable to having this added on to her bill. But you know, we've done a lot of work in the state of Texas regarding human trafficking and those issues. And in this bill, we were going through and identifying people who were potentially victims of being coerced to have an abortion or being victims of human trafficking. And we just want to make sure that it's clear that something is done with that information. So with the consent of the person who is being interviewed, they can actually give them the information on where to go to report this, or they can actually report it to law enforcement for that person with their consent. So it's a fairly simple amendment. I mean, regardless of where you are on the overall issue, this is important towards combating human trafficking. I would appreciate your support. And Mr. President, I believe it is acceptable to the author.
Senator Paxton, acceptable. Members, the question is on the amendment. Any objection to the amendment? I want to go slow. Yesterday, someone missed an objection. Any objection to the amendment? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
I rise for brief comment in opposition to the bill.
You are recognized.
Thank you so much for recognizing me, Mr. President, and thank you for your indulgences, Senators. Also, I want to thank Senator Paxton for her compassion yesterday. Yesterday was a wrenching day, and I very, very much appreciate the good conversation that we had afterward. I rise in opposition in the hopes that we can all work together to stop salting this wound and begin addressing these wounds. Women living in poverty in Texas, 17% compared with 13% in the United States. Children living in poverty in Texas, 21% compared to 17% in the United States. Percentage of Texans without health insurance in Texas compared to the US, 18.4% before COVID-19, compared to 9.2% in the United States before COVID-19. That percentage is probably closer to 30% in the midst of COVID. Percentage of people without health insurance who are women and children in Texas. Women, 26% without health insurance compared to 12.8% in the rest of the country. Children, 12.7%, nearly 3 times higher than the percentage in the United States. Teen pregnancy rates in Texas, 24 per 1,000 teens in Texas versus 17 in the rest of the United States. And for TANF benefits, only 5.9% of Texas families who are eligible, as opposed to the 21.7% in the United States. These are wounds that need to be healed. And so I rise in opposition to this bill because this bill seeks to delay or dissuade a woman's right to choose through promises of assistance this state has to date shown no intention of fulfilling. And I'm hoping to be a part of changing that legacy in this chamber. Let's work together to actually make good on these promises and provide these services, these supports, this prosperity to the people of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Paxton, you're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, Senator West, did you want to speak? I didn't see your light, I'm sorry. You're recognized.
This is the first time, members, that I've spoken on these bills. And to those persons, Senator Eckhart, that don't like these bills, they need to do something about it. And this is what I mean. I don't blame the Republicans in this chamber for passing these bills. You have power, it's part of your agenda, then you use that power to pass these bills. And that's what's happening today. And so for those of us that are against these type of bills, the only way that we're going to be able to fight these types of bills on the floor of the Senate, the legislature, executive branch of government, to make certain we get the power to be able to do that. Right now, we don't have it. And we continue to complain about what the Republicans are doing. They're doing what they were elected to do, pass these particular bills. So I tell Democrats, independents, other Republicans that don't like these bills, the only way to make certain that we do something about it is to make certain we have the power to do it, and don't be afraid to use the power that we receive by virtue of the vote. That's what our friends, our colleagues, the Republicans are doing.
Senator Paxton, you're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. This bill, to your point, Senator Eckhart, is tailored to connect with compassion and real help to women who find themselves in a very difficult situation. And I look forward to working with you, Senator Eckhart, to address the needs of women in these situations. This is the purpose of this bill. Senator Whitmire spoke about his friend. And I want to thank you for having compassion on your friend. And you mentioned, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think what you said was she basically was in a position where she said, I don't really know what else to do. This is exactly why this bill matters. So many women don't know what to do. And so many women, as Senator Eckhart mentioned earlier, feel isolated in this decision. That's the purpose of this bill. It is to connect with women in this moment before they make a very final decision. The numbers say that 3 out of 4 women at this point of decision say they just don't know what to do. They don't know what else to do. And this bill is there to say, here's what is available. And there are people that are ready to help and walk with you. And then it's their decision. But we will walk with you. Thank you, members, for listening with open hearts. Thank you for your consideration, compassionate, visionary consideration, and supporting the Every Mother Matters Act. And with that, I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton.
There are 20 yes votes, 11 no votes. The bill finally passes. Congratulations. Members, we have one more bill, and we're just working through an amendment issue here. Give us a moment. Senator Buckingham for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. The Nominations Committee Action Report from our Monday, March 29th, 2021 meeting has been placed on your desks. In accordance with Senate rules, which senators, we do actually have rules for those of you who missed it earlier, this report will be eligible for consideration tomorrow. Thank you, members and Mr. President.
While we're waiting for Senator Hughes, are there any other announcements? Senator Hancock?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Rules 11 and 11.18 so that the Senate Committee on Business and Commerce can meet in the Betty King Room immediately upon adjournment. Let's just say upon adjournment. On doing that, March 30th to consider one remaining bill and to vote on pending legislations. This is a change of location, so we were meeting on in the chamber, and that we'll be moving to the Betty King Room.
Thank you, Senator. Any objection? Hearing none. Motion adopted. Members and Senator Blanco, this is another 3-day issue you might want to be listing. You'll figure out what they are. The chair lays out the following resolution. The secretary will read the resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 37 by Whitmire granting the legislature permission to adjourn for more than 3 days.
Senator Whitmire, you're recognized to explain the resolution to Senator Blanco and 29 other members.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the concurrent resolution which allows us to adjourn for more than 3 days during the period beginning on Wednesday, March 31, 2021, and ending on Tuesday, April 6, 2021, Easter weekend.
Questions on the adoption of the resolution? The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
31 ayes, no nays. The resolution is adopted. Senator Hughes, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 12.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 12. Senate Bill 12 has to do with free speech.
Members, can we have a little bit of order? And can you speak up a little bit, Senator? Hold the mic up a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 12 has to do with free speech. It was in 2017 that Justice Kennedy, in an opinion joined by several of the court's more liberal justices, called social media, quote, the modern public square, unquote. He acknowledged that there's these few dominant websites, and I'm quoting him again, for many are the principal source for knowing current events, checking ads for employment, speaking, and listening. He went on to say they are, quote, perhaps the most powerful mechanisms available to a private citizen to make his or her voice heard, end of quote. I think we'd all have to acknowledge that social media has become the new town square. That's where folks go to hash it out, to express their views, to exchange ideas. We also recognize that these companies who have chosen to go into the communications business are for all practical purposes and we would say legal purposes, common carriers. What's the significance of that? Well, your telephone company cannot deny you service because they don't like your politics. Your cable television provider can't cut you off because of your religion. Because they are common carriers and offering their services broadly, they cannot discriminate on those bases. By the same token, this handful of social media companies with virtual monopoly power, in fact, the market share and power they enjoy to squeeze out competition, it dwarfs, it shames what were called monopolies back during the ages of the robber barons and that time in our country. They are monopolistic in nature, have immense power, and they control entrance to the market by this. So for those reasons, it's appropriate for the legislature to act. When we look at a small group, we could say they're an oligarchy, a small group of folks, mostly in San Francisco, that want to control free speech for all the rest of us. And it's no secret that most of the attention has been drawn to their censorship of conservative speech. And many of us have experienced it, our constituents have experienced it, and we can look at the practices of Google. That internal memo was leaked called the Good Censor. Take a look at that. I don't know if you can still Google it, but try to find it on the internet and look what they encourage people to do. Look at the political donations of the leaders of these organizations, and it's clear when we see how they apply content moderation that they are not viewpoint neutral, not even close. Their practices primarily limit conservative speech, but we understand on this Senate floor how important free speech is. Whether I agree with your speech or not, in America, in Texas, we believe in an exchange of ideas. We're not afraid of a discussion. We want to hear the other side and hear all sides, and our model of government relies on that good faith exchange. If current trends continue, we could end up with a conservative internet and a liberal internet, and where Americans go there and are further driven apart from one another, more frustrated, more angry, rather than having these common places where we can share ideas, where we can hash it out. Senate Bill 12 addresses this growing problem that we're more aware of every day. Senate Bill 12 has two parts. The first demands some transparency out of the social media platforms. The bill requires a social media platform to publicly disclose on an accessible website the criteria they use. How do they select the content that they're going to keep you from seeing? How is that done? And what they allow. How do they make those decisions? It also requires the platform to implement an easily accessible complaint procedure for folks to submit a complaint regarding illegal content, stuff they see that needs to be removed, or the platform's removal of the user's own content. I think we've all had calls from constituents and experienced the frustration when something is blocked or removed. You can't figure out why. You can't get through to a person to get an answer. What else does the bill do? It requires that when there's a report of illegal content, they have to have, within 24 hours, investigate that, allow a user whose content's been removed to move forward with that. So there are important protections in place to allow free speech and to remove illegal and legally objectionable content. The bill also includes a legislative finding that, these biggest sites are common carriers of public speech. And it draws a distinction between censoring based on content and censoring based on viewpoint. We all understand viewpoint discrimination violates the First Amendment, and we would stress that though private companies, these companies have immense power, and much of that given by the government. Through Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, they've been granted extensive power and extensive protection. And we all know the law is clear that the government cannot give to a third party the power to do what it cannot do. They cannot make these folks censors for them. We know that's not allowed, and that's not what the First Amendment is about. So what about Section 230? Many states have filed bills to deal with this problem, and some have addressed Section 230, some have not. Under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, passed in the 1990s, states do have limited authority to deal with social media companies. Senate Bill 12 has been drafted by legal scholars, very sharp people in this body and outside, in a way that complies with Section 230, complies with federal law, and it allows Texans to get back online when they've been wrongly knocked off. That is the gist of the bill. I will, should the Senate see fit to suspend the rules and allow the bill to go forward, I'll have a couple of floor amendments I'd like to visit with you about. But that's what the bill does. I move suspension and yield for your questions.
Senator West, for what purpose?
Will the senator yield for questions?
You yield.
Of course, I'll yield.
Let's thank you very much, Mr. President and Senator Hughes. This is not an unexpected debate. You know, I want to talk about a couple of things. Property rights.
Yes, sir.
We have been very guarded in this body concerning property rights, have we not?
We have, as we should.
Okay. And the very business entities that this particular bill address deals with individual companies that have property rights. Would you not agree?
That's right, Senator.
Okay. And would you also agree that federal law, specifically as you alluded to, Section 230, governs exactly what the protections are for these types of companies? Is that correct?
It does. Obviously, the U.S. Constitution and other federal laws, but yes, sir, 230 is definitely applicable here.
230 is based on the power granted in the Constitution of the United States. And so we're dealing with a federal law, and we're trying to navigate it around it to enact a state statute that's compliant with Section 230. Would that be a fair statement?
Senator, I wouldn't say navigate around it, but comply with it. Yes, sir. You're correct.
But you're not trying to get around it?
I beg your pardon?
You're not trying to get around 230?
Well, we are following 230. I'll put it that way.
Okay. How are we following? How does this follow 230?
So, Senator, Section 230, as you know, it's 47 U.S. Code, Section 230, protection for private blocking and screening of offensive material.
Right.
Under civil liability, right? No provider, I'm in Section C2, civil liability. No provider of an interactive computer service shall be held liable on account of any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or user considers to be in that laundry list. You know, obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy. You know that. And then it goes on to say, effect on other laws. And subsection 3 says, nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent any state from enforcing any state law that is consistent with this section. It goes on to say that no cause of action may be brought and no liability imposed under any state or local law inconsistent with this section.
Hold your point.
Yes, sir.
What cause of action can be brought under this statute?
Senator, no cause of action that's inconsistent with this section can be brought. And I'll tell you, I think I know what that means. Is that what you're asking?
Give me an example of a cause of action that can be brought.
A cause of action that
under this statute.
A cause of action that could be blocked by Section 230 would be a cause of action for money damages.
You misunderstood my question.
Okay.
I'm saying under this particular bill, what cause of action can be brought?
Thank you, Senator. Under Senate Bill 12, we are providing a declaratory judgment. So any Texan who has been discriminated against based on their speech can bring a declaratory judgment action, and they can seek injunctive relief to get back online and attorney's fees, not money damages, but a declaratory judgment. That's what would be provided under Senate Bill 12.
Okay, let me ask this question. Are these entities governmental entities?
Which entities?
I mean, like the entities that you are targeting in this particular bill.
The social media companies?
Right.
No, sir, they're not.
Okay, so how do you have a First Amendment action against a private company?
Senator, just like those common carriers by rail have to take all comers, just like the phone company and the cable company cannot discriminate against you on one of these bases. They are so big and they've chosen to get into the communication business. They're also virtual monopolies. My goodness, they're more than virtual monopolies. So I think we would agree that the law has historically recognized that common carriers are held to a different standard.
Are these considered common carriers?
Yes, sir. That's our position. That's part of what's in this bill.
And that's our position.
Well, Senator, as you know, that's sometimes determined by legislation, sometimes by litigation, and we're putting it in legislation here we believe will be supported by the courts.
Okay, help me to understand this. By federal law, are these media companies common carriers?
I beg your pardon?
Are these media companies determined to be common carriers by federal law?
I have not seen a court case that's spoken to it. We may be generating that here. I don't know if a court has spoken to that specific question yet. If you look at the elements of what a common carrier is, based on their size, based on who they offer their services to, and based on the type of business they're in, we believe this passes the test. But no court has held that yet. Let's give them a chance to.
You would agree that your position on these companies being common carriers is not a unique position. It's been articulated before. Is that correct?
It has been articulated. I'm not sure if it's been litigated, but it has been articulated. That's right.
And in the articulation of it, what's been the final analysis? Are you familiar?
The articulation of it, I missed you.
When there has been articulation of the argument that you're making that these companies are considered common carriers, what's been the ultimate decision? Do you know?
Well, Senator, I don't know if it's been litigated, to tell you the truth. I think it will be here, but I don't know if it has been. You may recall Justice Thomas wrote something last year that said, all this talk about, and I'm going to paraphrase him, he's smarter than me, but all this talk about Section 230, people are talking about what somebody said Section 230 said, but if you read the words, it provides a path for the states to take action. That's what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so then, in other words, this particular bill, we know that it's going to probably end up being in court and probably ultimately decided by the Supreme Court. Would you agree?
Yes, sir. It's very likely. Based on all the money that's being spent on the other side, I think they'll stop at nothing to keep doing their censorship, to keep imposing their views on the rest of us.
Now let's talk about censorship. What language do you believe is offensive that these common quote-unquote carriers have been blocking or determining to be inappropriate?
So are you asking for examples of specific language?
Examples, right.
Well, Senator, of course, the laundry list there in Section 230 is helpful, and I didn't read the whole thing.
No, I'm not talking about 230. I'm not talking about 230. I'm talking about what language or content has been blocked that propels you to offer this particular bill.
I misunderstood. Senator, you may recall the Born Alive Infant Protection Act that this body passed. The Born Alive Infant Protection Act that this body passed said when a little baby has been born, that the baby's life is protected, not a radical concept. Your Senate Republican colleagues had a Facebook ad, I'm answering your question, with a picture of a beautiful, healthy baby, nothing gory, and the ad said the Republican women in the Texas Senate support the Born Alive Infant Protection Act.
That was blocked?
That was blocked, Senator, and Facebook told us, well, that could lead to an unpleasant experience. Now, we pushed back on them, finally got a hold of somebody over there, and they said, oh, I see what you mean. We probably shouldn't have blocked that. Now, we knew who to call. Your constituents and mine back home don't know who to call at Facebook. As I can give you more examples. Cottonwood Creek Church over in your neighborhood in Collin County, just north of Dallas, they had a Facebook ad to promote their Easter sunrise service. And I know that's important to you and me. That's coming up. They had an ad to promote their Easter sunrise service, and Facebook blocked that. I got a call and was sent an example from a Republican Hispanic group in Texas, and they were blocked because their ad promoting, it said, you know, Hispanics share Republican values in Texas. That was blocked as being discriminatory. Senator, now respectfully, you've heard stories like this, I bet.
I've heard stories that they have blocked content containing racial attacks on people, haven't you?
Well, Senator, I'm sure that, yes, sir, I'm sure that's right.
Don't you agree that those types of attacks ought to be blocked? Or do you think that's First Amendment?
Under the laundry list of Section 230, those kind of attacks would clearly be covered. Wouldn't you say, my goodness, excessively violent, harassing, those type of attacks would clearly be covered under the language of Section 230?
You know, I guess we could stand up here and debate this for a long time, which I'm pretty sure both of us could probably do, okay? But again, I want to go back to property rights. These companies have no property rights. I mean, we have been a staunch defender on this floor, raising our voice in terms of we're going to protect private property rights. Are these private property rights?
Just like the phone company and the cable company and the train and the bus service, yes, sir.
Well, okay, that, you know, again, that hasn't been determined, what you're saying. And in terms of these companies, you're classifying them as common carriers. And I'm not going to sit up and say I'm an expert in this particular area, but I know of no case law statutes that have called these particular companies common carriers. Do you?
If Senate Bill 12 passes, we'll have a statute that calls them common carriers. At least one in Texas I'm aware of.
Let me be real specific. Do you know of any federal legislation or any statute that has called these particular companies common carriers?
I don't believe Congress has touched this since the 1990s, to be honest. So I don't know of any. I don't know of any at the federal level.
And so when you make a comparison between these companies with common carriers that have been already defined, that's not a valid comparison. Would you not agree?
Well, Senator, I would say it's valid because we can look at those cases going back to the early 1900s and look at the criteria they followed to determine who's a common carrier. And the cases go that far back. Many are state law cases about whether a state can regulate.
Okay, let's talk about this.
So if we look at those elements, we find that they apply in this case.
All right. Now, you would agree that these companies that you're attempting to define as a common carrier in the state of Texas are in interstate commerce. Would you not agree?
Senator, I don't think that's been defined so broadly. I think everything's interstate commerce. But yes, sir, I think I agree with you.
If a company is in interstate commerce, how much authority do we have for companies in interstate commerce? Isn't that a federal issue as opposed to a state issue?
Well, Senator, Section 230 says that nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent any state from enforcing any state law consistent with this section. So we have the very law which the other side claims stops us, enables us to take action.
As long as it's not in conflict with federal law, though, correct?
Well, this is federal law, but that's right.
Okay, and so from that vantage point, federal law will preempt anything we do here in this state as it relates to Senate Bill 12.
Well, Senator, I guess it depends on the type of preemption we're talking about, and but it would depend on what the federal statute said, how broadly whether it preempted the field or the particular issue. And I'm going to confess, I get I get abstention and preemption kind of confused. You're going to have to help me, but it depends on.
I'm doing my best to try to help.
I know. I thank you for that. But it would depend on whether the feds had completely preempted the field or a part of the field. And again, Section 230 specifically says, a state, nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent any state from enforcing any state law consistent with this section.
Right.
So they gave us an avenue. It's unusual for the feds to say, hey, states, you can regulate here, but they did.
Okay, Counsel, you are a very good litigator. You know as well as I that we can pass laws as long as they don't conflict with federal laws, and to the extent that they do, federal law preempts them, right?
To the extent they conflict, yes, sir, of course.
Okay,
of course.
So that's what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, I follow you now.